Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we discuss day-to-day problems people face in their lives. Let's start with the video.
To give a brief introduction of myself, I'm a 21-year-old female. I live alone, alas, as I've been living with my mother for a good majority of my life. The rest of that majority includes the few countable days I got to spend with my birth dad, and the rest of my few days of solitude have been since I moved out. The reason my dad is absent from my life is still unknown to me, as everyone in my family seems to have agreed to not telling me the truth about my origins or how I came to be, or at least the emotional and relationship state of my parents when I came into the world. Every time I would ask any of my reliable and immediate family members about how I came to be, I'd end up with a different story to account for and more confusion and questions than ever. Nevertheless, regardless of how I came to be or the reasoning behind which everyone seems to insist on hiding things away from me, I've always been very appreciative of the way I grew up and the collective effort of my family put into raising me. I don't really want to bash anyone or call out anyone for the absence of fatherly figures in my life. My granddad has always had a problem with me being fatherless, but he was kind to me for the most part. So I guess I could call him the closest thing I've ever had to a fatherly figure, solely based on the fact that he's a man. So, as I explained, my daddy issues were never a topic that took more than a couple of seconds worth of thoughts for me. I just didn't care, and I was living an average, healthy, and happy life with my mother. I had no reason to complain, and I really didn't want to indulge myself in expectations or inquiries that could end up breaking my heart. Yet, though my curiosity has never been a topic of reconsideration, I knew where I stood on chasing after information that I didn't need or didn't go after it despite that fact. I would always come across these clues that fit together perfectly in a larger picture, yet contradicted what the people around me were telling me. Around the time I was due to be birthed, my mother was apparently married to a man with the initials AL. She certainly refused to speak of him, and so did the rest of my family. They all spoke of how terrible he was and how abusive. How they're so grateful he left my mom's life and consecutively mine before causing any irreversible damage. Yet, I came across many pictures of my mother with a man that I'm extremely unfamiliar with, in which she seemed purely and utterly in love. Her belly was up to her nose in some of them, so it was only fair to assume it was him. I also found a couple of diplomas and certificates in our attic that my mother just removed from my possession and threw away immediately. I was really young then, and no matter how hard I try, which isn't very much, I can't remember the names that held the initials AL. That was, of course, until I moved out of my mother's house a few days ago. Ever since I got the keys to my new apartment, I've been getting multiple letters with the initials AL. Only on these letters, the full name is written and signed by the person who sent them, and whose identity masks that of all the AL I've always envisioned. I'm not quite sure what to do with this. I don't really know if I want to inform my mother or any one of my family members, seeing that they don't want me involving myself with him. I also think there must be a reason why they're trying so hard to protect me from finding this stepdad of mine's identity and hearing what he has to say. I know that my curiosity about the topic is close to non-existent, but I still question to what extent I can keep stacking these letters up and thinking that I'll throw them away the following morning before I get the guts to open them and see their content. Could he be a killer? A convicted abuser? The definition of a bad person? He could just be a nice, caring, and somewhat careless person that landed himself in a terrible sequence of events and caused himself many years of loneliness and yearning over what could have been his, aka a stable, loving, and beautiful little family. I guess I won't ever know the answers to my inquiries unless I grow a pair and open the envelopes. I think I'll do it tomorrow at last, but I can't describe how truly anxious I am about the situation. Update. It's been a couple of weeks since I uploaded the last post, and I finally gotten the guts to open the letters and read their contents. Only I can't really tell whether I'm content with the events and realization that it cost to my relationship with everyone. The letters that were sent to me contained different formats of wording, the same messages. The person sending them apologized for having caused me so much pain and begged again and again and always possible to get a chance to be granted a chance alas and be spoken to by the person has been trying to contact for years. I honestly would have left the letters in their unanswered state and just threw them out before continuing on with my life if it wasn't for one common aspect which they contained: This person, let's call him Stepdad, invited me to the hospital I was born in 20 years ago and said he'd be waiting at the exact same time and in the exact spot he'd been waiting for every day for the past many years. Not only did that confirm my suspicions of the person's identity, but it also piqued my curiosity in a way I've never paid to find him. I was curious to know whether he would actually be waiting facing the hospital every day and if I'd find him. Granted that I go at the exact time instructed in all of the letters. I went to the hospital the following day with a mind racing with fears and misconceptions about this man. I was scared to know how he found my address and was terrified to think I was making the mistake of my lifetime. I was quaking in my boots as I walked towards the hospital from my car as I saw a man sitting alone facing the hospital on a chair. Dark gray hair and a pair of vision glasses that glared invasively at the book in hand. I walked over in his direction and stood facing him, and I can't describe the rush of emotions that overtook his face when he noticed my feet and looked up to see me. I've never seen such a mixture of emotions. Some I wasn't even familiar with. Ones that I could name would be relief, fear, anticipation, longing, mourning, and hopefulness. He sat me down and expressed to me how grateful he was that I was giving him the time of the day to come to talk to him, when he has clearly been tending to that chair hoping I'd show up for longer than he nor I could care to admit. He explained to me how my mother and her family plotted to get me out of his life and him out of theirs the moment my mother got impregnated by my biological dad. The truth is that my birth dad's family is rich and of high social placement. Stepdad and my mom were rather tight and their relationship seemed to be headed in a good direction, even after she got pregnant with someone else's child. He was open to raising me, and as the months went by, he entertained the idea of fathering me and fell in love with the image of that small family he'd always wanted. The day my mother went into labor, my grandparents called him and let him know that they were officially cutting him out of my mom and her upcoming child's life. They called him poor and disrespected the way through which he was making his living. He owns a bookstore that has been open for over 25 years now, and barely even paused to let him explain how much he loved my mother and cared for the child she held inside her. They threatened to call the police on him if he ever tries to contact me or my mother after that day, and even got my mom to confirm all of their cruel thoughts to him. Not in person, of course, just over the phone. But he complied. He didn't try to contact me for a very long time. The only time he had seen me before that day was when he saw my grandparents and mother leaving the hospital from the seat we sat on that day. He refrained from looking at me for years and counted the days until I finally turned 18. He hoped that I'd grow up to be a rational person unlike my birth family and care to listen to what his letters entailed, at least so he could see me one first and final time in person and get his honorable right of being heard. I'm not very sure how I feel about any of this, as this whole thing is far too strange to what I'm used to, and I don't even know if I want to confront my grandparents and mother about what I'd done. But at the same time, I can't keep this secret for too long, as I've never been one for secrets and I don't care to start now. Although I'm extremely glad to hear a truth that makes sense and get in touch with a person I've heard about for so long, I don't think I've ever been so confused and uncertain in my whole life, and honestly, it's really freaking me out. Next story. This is my first post on my account. I, 26 female, is engaged to Jack, 32 male. Jack. Jack is very soft-spoken and kind. He never argues or puts up a fight and honestly makes me feel like I have full control of the relationship. I appreciate this and I cherish every minute of it. Jack still lives with his parents, Bertha and Dom. Bertha is a devout Catholic that believes she knows everything. She has a holier-than-thou complex. She has told me on countless occasions that our marriage will not count in the eyes of God because I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant. She tells my fiancé that our marriage is a mortal sin and he will have to suffer the consequences in his afterlife. My fiancé, who is very meek, never stands up for our relationship. He just sits there quietly. Bertha is always finding ways to make me feel excluded and unwanted. The biggest fight we've had was when I started to plan the wedding. His mother demanded a Catholic church. I explained to her that our budget would be $2,000. Since her church cost $1,000, I asked her to pay for the church and my fiancé and I would pay for the reception. This is where it gets bad. His mom was happy to plan the ceremony and excited to have it at her church. She had no issue with paying for the church. After a month, I asked her about the plans and wanted to share my ideas for the reception. His mother told me that she had planned everything. She used my $2,000 proposed budget and arranged for her side of the family to have a catered sit-down dinner at the hall for their reception. Plot twist, my family wasn't involved. I ended up canceling the whole wedding and blocked Bertha's number. I started planning the wedding alone. My joy was short-lived when it came time to mail out our save the dates. I asked my fiancé to get the addresses for his side of the family. Naturally, he asked his mom to verify certain houses since he didn't often visit family. Bertha became angry and told me that I'm not allowed to send out save the dates. In her own words, my side of the family is very private. For their own safety and well-being, I can't give you the addresses. If you want them mailed out, then you will give all the letters to me and I will do it. I was shocked. I tried to be the bigger person and compromise, but she stressed the need for her family to be safe and didn't want me to have any of their information. I have had enough of her nonsense and finally put my foot down. I looked up everyone's addresses on white pages and made a Google Doc. Then I went to Bertha's house and told her that I'm sending out the save the dates. Bertha proceeded to argue with me and said that I'm violating her family's privacy and I'm being disrespectful. So Reddit, I have one question. Am I the a-hole for Googling my fiancé's family's addresses? Not the a-hole. Mother-in-law is clearly trying to exert control wherever she can. But there's a lot of I in this post. I canceled the wedding, I Googled the addresses, etc. with barely any mention of your fiancé. Where is he in all of this? Why can't he figure out how to obtain the addresses for his family members if he wants them at the wedding? Why can't he deal with his mother? Not the a-hole. This is ridiculously controlling of your mother-in-law. If her family is so private and fearful for their safety, then they could have unlisted their info from the white pages. Looking people's addresses is literally why the white pages exist. You didn't exactly do anything earth-shattering, especially given that she was being so uncooperative. But I agree with those who are asking why you're choosing to marry into this family. If nothing else, your fiancé should be standing up for you and your relationship, bare minimum. I guess based on the other comments, this might be unpopular, but everyone sucks here. I don't think I need to explain why Bertha is an a-hole, because that's pretty obvious. But you and Jack are as well, in my opinion. You're setting yourself up for decades of conflict and heartache by marrying into this messed up family. If Jack isn't able to stick up for you now, he will never learn how to do it. He has no business getting married if he can't say no to his mother. And you're accepting less than what you deserve by wanting to get married to this wet blanket. You deserve someone who will be on a team with you and who will support you over his mother. It sounds like Jack is swapping his controlling mother for a controlling partner, and everybody involved here deserves better. Next story. My 36 male, ex-wife 35 female, has 2 kids, 7 female and 6 male. We've been divorced for 3 years now, and we're both happily remarried. We were bad spouses, but are now decent friends and both good parents. My ex-wife has primary custody, but currently I get them every other weekend and 2-3 evenings a week. It also helps that my wife, 38 female, and I just live a few miles away in the next town. Since the divorce, my ex-wife has been a stay-at-home mom, and her husband, 36 male, has a good job making $120,000. I have a good job and make $150,000 a year, but my wife has always been the breadwinner and recently received a sizable promotion raise up to $280K per year. I've always wanted to go back to school, but with my work schedule, I was never able to do it. My wife and I have been talking and she thinks I should quit my job, go back to school, and be a house husband. She already made a joke about getting me a French maid outfit. Seriously though, this would allow us to spend more time with my kids too. We've been going over this for a few weeks now, talking through how it would reduce our income, retirement savings, how it would affect our marriage, etc. We also talked about how we could logistically do it with the kids too. Luckily, since we live close to my kids' school, it should be easy for me to do school drop-offs and pickups, so I could do a 50-50 arrangement. Here's my concern. Since my ex-wife was a stay-at-home mom and I kept working, I've been paying her $2,000 a month. If I quit my job and went 50-50 in custody, I think it would be fair to go back to court to get the child support reduced to 0 since neither of us would be working and we would be 50-50. I talked to my ex-wife about this, and at first she was on board until I brought up child support. She blew up, calling me selfish for only thinking about myself and that, since I have a good job, I need to keep it. I didn't want to get into a fight with her, so I hung up. But now I'm second guessing everything. Am I the a-hole for wanting to quit my job to be a house husband and go to court for 50-50 visitation and remove child support? Edit 1. My ex-wife and I split all kid-related expenses, and I have covered their health insurance since birth. I offered to continue paying for their coverage. Well, it would be on my wife's plan, but still. Edit 2. As mentioned above, we live just a few miles away from my ex-wife and her husband. Nothing would change for the kids' education, sports, friends, favorite donut shop, etc. Edit 3. My wife was a successful real estate agent making $100K a year. She chose to be a stay-at-home mom after she got married. Edit 4. I will of course consult with an attorney before taking any actions. Info 1. Your kids aren't babies anymore. How do you think a 50-50 arrangement would impact them? It seems incredibly unsettling for a child to have to constantly switch homes. 2. Have you spoken to your attorney? Is this even something feasible, or are you just ruminating on possible changes? 3. Are you doing this primarily to stop paying support, or because you think that it is in the kids' best interest to have this change to their custody arrangement? 1. They already switch homes when I get them every other weekend and every other weeknight. 2. We've never had an attorney as the divorce was amicable. Child support was put through the CA calculator. 3. I'm doing this to spend more time with my kids and go back to school. I want to stop paying because if our situations are equal, I think it would be unfair for me to have to pay anything. Not the a-hole. If you legitimately take the kids 50% of the time and your wife is okay with it, but realistically, the judge might decide differently based on your kids' lifestyles and financial needs. Also, how old are your kids? Will 50-50 create problems for their school schedules, friends, hobbies? I would talk to your kids too and see how they would feel. It sounds like a part of your reasoning for this is to stop paying child support, but please make sure you're actually ready to be a full-time dad during your hours and your reasoning isn't just about the money and is also about wanting to see your kids more. Also, you will need to take on paying for half of their new clothes as they grow, school supplies, doctor's appointments. Your wife isn't paying zero in child support. She and her husband are paying for food, clothing, etc. $2,000 a month really isn't a whole lot when paying kids' expenses. Everyone sucks here. So you both and your ex are relying on your partners to take care of your kids. What happens if there's a divorce or illness? Will the kids be impacted not just by the reduction in money from child support to pay for lessons, etc., but also being taken away from their friends in this new 50-50 arrangement? There's a lot about what you and your wife want, but very little about the kids involved. Lastly, while ex-hubby's making good money, do you know their financial situation? Don't take for granted that while this can work out for you, then everyone should be okay.